Okay, folks, breaking news. Justin Trudeau has officially, this is the lowest he has ever been in the polls. This is the lowest I think any sitting prime minister who's running for re-election has ever been in the polls. This is insane. And Pierre Poilievre on the other side is at the highest peak that anyone has ever seen. And then you also have the government trying to basically reverse Uno card this government shutdown and escalate it even further to the point where Parliament is just no longer in session and all elected officials pretty much go home and it's done, right? It's done as if they are taking summer break or winter break. This is insane. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I really want to encourage you all to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. As well as I just want to mention that if you are a channel member, you do get 15% off. There's a code on the community tab for these sticker packs. Now, these are available to everybody and anybody, right? You got one pack here that shows all of these classics. Then you have another pack here that's got the new merch, right? The only scams, Trudeau must go, keep calm, never vote, liberal, all that good stuff. So channel members do get 15% off. Just make sure that you go to the community tab to check that out. And without further ado, let's just get into this, guys. This is insane. So this morning I made a video and it showed that the Conservative Party was sitting at, well, let's see here, 221 projected seats. And right now, as you can see, they're at 228. Justin Trudeau fell in the past several months. He was up to 71. Then he was down to 64. Then he was at 61 this past week. Now he's at 53. This is insane. This is the lowest any sitting prime minister has ever been for projected seats. You got the Bloc at a standstill of 42 points. They've been pretty consistent with that. And then you have the NDP up from 17 to, I got to zoom in here. It is a little number for a little man, to 18 seats. All right. So the NDP is gaining a little bit of momentum. Green is still exactly where they've always been. And then, of course, 99% likely across the board, hell, 100% likely across the board for winning the most seats and odds of a majority government. Guys, this is crazy. There's never been a better time for opposition parties to come together and strike down the government by doing a vote of non-confidence. And that's what we're taking a look at, because the Bloc Quebecois leader, he did say last week, if we don't get what we want by October 29th, we're going to call a vote of non-confidence for an election before Christmas. And now he's since changed his mind. I think last Thursday or Friday, he said, if we don't get what we want in the next few days, we're going to call for non-confidence. So this week, we could see for the first time that we've ever really seen, well, since Trudeau's been in, a vote of non-confidence where it's not only the Conservatives voting in favor of it. You have the Bloc, and the NDP hasn't yet said anything. But again, the fact that the Bloc is ready to pull that trigger and do a vote of non-confidence, it could mean three things technically. Jagmeet says, no, we still have faith in Justin Trudeau, which would be insane, and I think he would lose tremendously amount of respect from everyone who, still somehow respects him. He could vote with the Bloc, or he could abstain from voting. The entire Bloc could just say, you know what, we're not going to vote. We're going to sit this one out. Let it be. Let it be. And so there's a lot of craziness, folks, and you got to stay tuned this week because it's going to get absolutely insane. So let's take a look at what's going on internationally, those tensions, because war is on the horizon, and then we're going to get into all this craziness with Canadian stuff. So you've got oil prices could rise to over $200 a barrel. I think they're currently sitting at 74, 78 if Israel attacks Iran's energy infrastructure. If they do that, Russia has said that they are going to get involved and basically go berserk on Israel. Then you have allegedly 2,000 Iranian missiles have been set on standby, which is going to be crazy because what we saw in the largest attack ever, which just happened several days ago, you had only 180 missiles actually hit Israel, and that was the largest attack that we've ever seen in the history of ever. And so 2,000, oh, that's not good. And then you have Russia says at the UN, it's becoming increasingly clear that Israel leadership aims to trigger a conflict between Iran and the United States. And I mean, there's a lot of speculation with that because the American election is just, within that month range. And it really feels like, in order for Democrats to kind of keep power, they would need some sort of superior, authorization to basically postpone, delay, or even cancel a election. Now, I'm not suggesting that they would, start a war so that they don't have to have the presidential election. I'm not at all suggesting that, but call a spade. Then you have the UAE eliminates all taxes on crypto transactions. That's pretty crazy. You're seeing a lot more rise in usages of crypto. Even in Canada, there's a lot of small businesses that, you can pay with Bitcoin, like 0.00025 Bitcoin would get you a coffee or something like that. I don't know if that's the exact, amount of Bitcoin, but nonetheless, kind of cool. Let me know what you guys think about cryptocurrency, just in general, down below in the comments. And now we're just going to glaze over a little bit at some ongoing protests, Palestinian protests, in front of Parliament here.
Calm down. No, shut the fuck off. Calm down. Shut the fuck off. Touch me, I dare you. I'm not touching you. I'm telling you to calm down. That's it. Just relax. I'm not touching anybody. Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. Stupid bitch. Calm down. Oh, excuse me. Who's talking?
Yes, the classic peaceful protest, right? That's fantastic, guys. That is fantastic. But now let's segue a little bit out of that and take a look at what's going on with the Bloc. So just to kind of recap what's happened or what's been said by the Bloc previously, let's take a look at this video.
They might hope that they will go further than October 29th. They will not. So they have until a few days from now to go on with the royal recommendation. And if they do not, we will start as rapidly as next week to speak with other oppositions in order to get ready to go into an election.
Bloc Quebecois Deputy House Leader Christine Normandin joins me now. Ms. Normandin, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you.
Right, and so they have sworn by this, that came out, I think, on Thursday or Friday, and so we are approaching the few-day mark, Monday, Tuesday, coming around the corner here. We're just going to have to wait and see how this plays out, but I can tell you, we're hitting the ground running tomorrow morning on Monday. It's going to be absolutely insane. I highly recommend you guys go subscribe to my other channel, House of Canada, also linked down below in the description, so you can come and watch the live streams of Question Period. Right now, let's take a look at what CTV analyst, or I guess guest analyst, Tom Mulcair, previous NDP leader, has to say about this.
So it doesn't look like the NDP and Bloc are in much discussion about toppling Trudeau at this point. Why is the NDP seemingly not too eager to bring down the government?
Well, because they have a number of things that they've negotiated with the Liberals as part of the pact before Mr. Singh tore it up that they want to see come into law. There's parts of the pharmacare that should be adopted anytime soon in the Senate, certainly before Christmas. And then there is a second phase of the dental care plan. These are things that the NDP wants to take into the next election. And Peter Julian made an interesting statement on Friday, looking at the absolute chaos that the Conservatives have decided to impose on the House of Commons, because they're all upset about a program that the Liberals had put in place to provide millions and millions of dollars for new green technologies. It turned into a typical government boondoggle with the money going out to very sketchy projects. And the Conservatives wanted all of the documents, as had been requested by the House back in June, to go to the RCMP. And the Speaker said, well, they were pretty well right in that. It was a question of privilege. But this is the type of inside the park baseball where the average Canadian just turns off. They don't pay any attention to this stuff. The Conservatives are convinced that they've got a real head of steam going and somehow the government's going to topple. And what Julian reminded the Conservatives of on Friday, Renee, was, hey, your behavior is one of the reasons that we will not be voting with you to take down the Liberal government. So they have a certain game plan of their own. They don't have a lot of money to fight a general election right now. And it requires all three opposition parties. Put another way, Renee, either the Bloc or the NDP have enough votes to keep the Liberals in power. And Peter Julian, very experienced House leader, very good strategist, just simply warning everybody, whether it's the Bloc or the Conservatives, don't count on us to continue this chaos. Canadians deserve a certain amount of stability. We're a prosperous, a peaceful country, and in the world today, that's a rarity. And no, we're not going to play this type of game that you're playing in Parliament, and we're not about to topple the government, despite the fact that they're no longer in the deal with the Liberals.
Now, Blanchet seems to be standing firm on that October 29th deadline. What's your read on the Bloc's demands?
It's huffing and puffing and threatening to blow the House down, but he hasn't got the ability to do it. But I will say this about the Bloc's approach. It was clever, very clever politically, because, Renee, there were essentially two things in there. One that costs nothing, which is essentially a promise to hold on to Canada's supply management system. So this is a very good system we have in Canada that protects our agricultural producers in several areas. Poultry, eggs, and dairy first among them. It essentially gives a fair price to the producers. It avoids having massive companies take over everything, because there is a guaranteed price and they're able to earn a decent livelihood compared to the south, south of the border in the United States. It's very hard to do the type of farming that we have here. So it's a good system, and they simply want the government to say in any future trade deal, we'll hold on to it. That part's easy. And it costs nothing. The one that does cost a lot of money, $16 billion to be exact, would be to include 65 to 74-year-olds in the top up to their old age security that now exists for 75 and over. Now, Trudeau is resisting that. He refused to give the royal assent that would be required to move this forward, because opposition parties are not allowed to spend public money outside of the budget. So they would have required government help. And Trudeau has so far said no. But where it's clever, Renee, and it's really deviously clever on the part of the Bloc, is that Trudeau is now being forced to vote against one of the few demographics, one of the few age groups that are on his side. He has lost the 18 to 35-year-olds to the Conservatives, period. And Trudeau knows that. He tried to change that in his last budget, didn't convince anyone. He's still dropping in the polls. One of the last groups of voters that are diehard Liberals, or mostly, are older Canadians. And so where it's clever on the part of the Bloc is they're forcing the Liberals to vote against one of their very, prime voting groups, which is seniors. So I think that Trudeau hasn't quite figured out how to deal with this stuff yet, and that's another reason that the Liberals continue to be in free fall in the polls. The most recent nanos has them.
I mean, we just saw the most recent update, and it's horrible, right? Justin Trudeau is sitting at 53 projected seats, but something that Tom Mulcair isn't taking into consideration is the fact that every single time, you've had the Conservatives raise a motion or try to do this campaign that would instill non-confidence in the government, it's only ever been Pierre and the Conservatives. No other party has joined. You've had a couple of independent MPs vote in favor of that, but regardless, it's only been that. And the fact that the Bloc is now, saying, hey, we're going to do this if we don't get to what we want, that could give Jagmeet Singh and the NDP the confidence to say, you know what, let's just get this done with, right? Let's do it. Trudeau is at an all-time low, and everybody wants a piece of the pie. Nobody, right? No, the other parties don't particularly want Pierre to be in power, but they also don't want Justin Trudeau to be in power. And so I think there's a lot of potentially backdoor deals that are happening. A lot of people are, a lot of the other party leaders, the Bloc and Jagmeet, are probably behind closed doors, in the DMs and the text messages saying, hey, Pierre, this is all my speculation, by the way. Hey, Pierre, let's figure this out, man. Let's call this election. We're gonna vote with you, and maybe you can just throw us a bone here and there. You never know. And look, I've been extremely overly optimistic. Someone, I'm sure there's people out there that would argue delusion level of optimism, but that's just me. And I'm still kind of pro this system. I still have faith, and whether you want to criticize that or not, that's your opinion, and I'm allowed to have mine. And now we have to talk about the next step. So Justin Trudeau could pull this out of a hat. The government has been frozen. We know that. They're not allowed to discuss any different motions. They're not allowed to discuss anything other than the fact that the government is pretty much frozen. So this thing that's coming into question right here is prorogation, right? It's the end of parliamentary session in Parliament of Canada and the parliaments of its provinces and territories. And that's what they're calling to do right now, potentially. This is a little bit of a Hail Mary move by Justin Trudeau, where he can pull this out of a hat and basically just freeze everything to the point where they can't even vote for a non-confidence. But again, we're just going to have to wait and see. And this is all because Justin Trudeau does not want to provide the RCMP with the proper unredacted documents, because he knows, we all know, that it would basically incriminate him, and he would, be held accountable for these very hefty criminal charges that he is very likely on the hook for. So again, it's just a super greasy game. But let's take a look at this latest panel here by CTV that really just explains this next step that Justin Trudeau could do.
It is not appropriate for an opposition day motion to set the precedent of getting a royal recommendation this way.
We were quite precise. We said at the very beginning of this that this is our position, this is our demands, and it will not change.
The Bloc Quebecois continues to up the ante on Parliament Hill, as we've been talking about today. The party issued an ultimatum to the government that if they don't support two key Bloc priorities, by the end of the month, they'll work with opposition parties to bring the government down and force an election. This week, they tabled a motion on one of those priorities, boosting old age security by 10% for Canadians over 65. That boost already applies to pensioners 75 and over. Cabinet ministers and most Liberals voted against the motion, prompting Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet to dig in, saying if the Liberals don't change their position in a matter of days, he's going to start talking to opposition parties to bring them down right away. Sources around the Prime Minister told me this week, after Mr. Blanchet said that, a planned cabinet shuffle was put on hold and concern about a potential election in the PMO reached a, quote, fever pitch. Good to see you. Scott, talk strategy if you could for a moment. The Liberals decided to vote against this motion. It's, of course, non-binding. It was not a confidence motion. Minister Karina Gold, the government House leader, told me they're still open to discussions, but it feels like the Bloc doesn't think it's going to move.
No, I don't know why the Bloc would think the government's going to move, and I don't know why the government would move now that it decided to play its cards the way it did. So, I mean, it's a challenge for the government in the sense that it means there's only one rope left that they swing on to keep this parliament alive in terms of opposition partners. That's the NDP now. But I don't know how the two parties come together. And, Blanchet knew where he was drawing the line. I thought it was sort of peculiar this week. He says, I'm drawing this line here. It's in ink. Don't dare try to cross it. Okay, you crossed it. I'm drawing it again and daring you not to cross it again. I think, that debate's over. So I think you pretty much have to operate that you can't, on the assumption that you can't rely upon the Bloc if you're the government for the balance of this parliament. That's why I think we're probably headed toward a prorogation eventually.
Yeah, okay, that's my double-barreled question to you, Kathleen. It puts all the cards in the NDP's court at this point. What do you anticipate they do with that? And do you think the government should prorogue from a strategic perspective?
So I said last week, and I stand by it, I think the Bloc misfired completely on this motion. I think that New Democrats will try. It does take 3 opposition parties to topple the government, and I think that New Democrats will have lots of opportunities to try to seek things and use power when they have it to make life better for Canadians. They've always done that. They've done that for 100 years.
What does that mean?
So
what are they going to ask for?
We know that pharmacare has passed. So they want to get those deals done with the provinces. They want to move forward on some of the legislation. They could ask for other things like electoral reform. We don't know where they're going to go exactly, or I don't specifically know. But there are clear asks like getting those deals done, getting pharmacare actually concrete in the provinces so people feel it and get some relief on terms of those bills. But in terms of prorogation, I think it would be smart, frankly. I mean, I wouldn't want the government to do that, but I think if I was sitting in the Liberals camp, I would say to them, yeah, prorogue, get to October, prorogue, take a time out, start up in the new year and keep on going. And then hopefully, whether it's the economic situation, people's affordability crisis, people will be happier post-Christmas. Who knows? Maybe it'll be a Christmas surprise. Yeah.
And I mean, this is technically in the rule book. And so we can't say that, as much as I would love to say this is illegal, this is an attack on our democracy. I personally think that this is an attack on our democracy by Justin Trudeau doing this, because there's just so much momentum against it that he likely doesn't really have a choice. And to be honest, I mean, if things are really going against him even further this week, chances are he will do this. And I mean, this is not going to help him in the polls, but it will. I mean, it'll diffuse all of the political tensions, all the political discussions that are happening. And that's obviously something that we don't want. We want to keep the tensions where they are. We want to keep the momentum. We want to keep the relevancy of what's happening right now. We want to keep that going, because that's how we get more and more people on board, more awareness to vote, and just more people riled up to actually make a difference, have their voices heard through a ballot. And if Justin Trudeau silences everybody, I mean, it's the country, right? Like that's crazy. That's crazy. I don't think I've ever seen that. It's likely this has happened before, or sorry, it's rare that this has actually happened before. But nonetheless, I mean, this is going to be insane. There's going to be mass outrage if Justin Trudeau pulls this off.
Just on that note, Shakir, this week, as I was saying, I interviewed the government House Leader. I asked her point blank about whether prorogation was on the table. She was actually very direct in saying, no, it wasn't. Many people contacted me after that and said, well, you know, ultimately that's the Prime Minister's decision. So she may not be in the know and able to say that, but it doesn't mean that truly it's off the table for the Prime Minister. Do you think that's a fair comment?
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I think, listen, prorogation, it's going to save them and buy them some time, and I totally get that. But I feel like the Liberals have this narrative that they put out there that they're the party that comes to Ottawa, that comes to Parliament, you know, pushes for the business of Canadians, pushes for legislation, and all the opposition parties, they obviously point to the Conservatives. They're the ones playing political games. They're the ones that don't want to move things forward. I think prorogation flies directly in contrast to that narrative the Liberals are putting forward. And sure, they could do it to save their skin, but I think a lot of voters and a lot of Canadians will look at this scenario and wonder, why is the government not operating? Why are they not moving things forward? Why is this pause happening right now? Are you just trying to stay in power? And I think they'll be punished for that, to be quite frank with you. So I'm not sure it's a smart strategy. It is buying them some time, but I'm not sure it's a smart strategy in terms of winning favor with Canadians.
I feel like the calculation, Scott, is certainly, as you know, as Shakir pointed out, the basis of the contrast they've tried to paint with other parties, particularly the Conservatives and the Bloc, even to a degree, in the past few weeks, has been, we're here working for Canadians, they're just playing politics. But when your livelihood is at stake, I feel like they're going to live with the consequence of the backlash from that, rather than an immediate defeat if they went to an election.
Exactly. I mean, you see somebody chiseling your name into a gravestone. It has a way of focusing the mind and perhaps changing the options available to your House Leader. Like, I hear what Shakir is saying. I don't remember the Harper government getting all high and mighty about how prorogation would be a terrible thing and just delay the inevitable. But I do think for the Liberals, there's an added question, which is, if you're going to be forced to move into a prorogation at some point, what do you use that time for? Is it just to delay the inevitable or to try to improve your fortunes? So if you're going to move to it, like, I think you bring in a fall economic statement, you invite a confidence vote, you put enough in there that the NDP do support it, then you call a prorogation on the basis of strength, and then, frankly, you have a real examination as to what you're going to do. Does the Prime Minister step down? You use that prorogation to have a leadership race. If he's not going to step down, how do you reorient your agenda completely? You're going to have to come to grips with the consumer carbon tax. So don't just call a prorogation and then go fishing. You're going to have to use that time, if you're forced to take it, to advance your fortunes in some way.
I think it would provide, though, Kathleen, the only opportunity the Liberals have between now and whenever the next election is to do that, to do all the stuff you guys have been talking about for months, and put something, substantial out there, whether it be a change in position on the carbon tax, a change in the leader, a tax cut, like a myriad of options, rather than the messaging that has been going on for the last 2 months, which is, we're just going to keep on doing this.
Yeah, they have to use the time wisely. But let's remember, the Conservatives in 2008 prorogued the House in the middle of a global financial crisis. That was a serious
time so it has happened.
The globe, and Harper didn't think twice about proroguing the Parliament. So I take some issue with Shakir.
But even then, there was a huge backlash from what I remember. I remember covering protests in Saskatoon when I worked in local media. it was a massive, this is a
But the
threat to
protests-
democracy, and it didn't ultimately punish him.
But the protests were actually built by the Conservative Party, who were actually rebelling against the fact that the Liberals and the Democrats at the time were trying to work together in a coalition. So they were actually anti-coalition at the time.
No, the protest I was covering was against prorogation. There were people who were upset at the anti-democratic nature of that. I'm just saying, and ultimately they weren't punished for it. So strategically,
no, they weren't punished. They weren't punished for it, even when it was in the middle of a financial crisis. I think the point that I would make is that it's weird to be a Conservative who, listen, we've had 14 sitting days as of today. Literally, they've gotten 2 days of government business done in those 14 days. Can you imagine going to work every day and just working, basically 20 minutes? That's what's happening in the House. But the Conservatives are...
I mean, I feel like that's just standard for any government job, whether they're in a shutdown, whether it's being prorogation, whether anything's happening. 20 minutes a day? Are you kidding me? That's tough for government officials, right? That's really tough. They get 2 union breaks in those 20 minutes. I'm just kidding, but also not really.
Stalling, blocking, obstructing, putting motion after motion. And then with no sense of irony whatsoever, House Leader Andrew Scheer will rise in the House and say, we have to call an election because this government's getting nothing done, but they're in fact gumming up the wheels of, in fact, getting anything done in the House. So maybe for all of our sakes, they should go to an election just to move forward. But I do think that the Liberals will have an opportunity to point to the obstructionist nature of what the Conservatives are doing in the House, how they're not getting anything done. Listen, it is the Liberals' responsibility to manage the House and to execute on things. But right now, what's happening across the street is not a lot. And so maybe we'd be better with a reset and the reorientation that Scott mentioned.
I take the point, and certainly I think that I don't know, Shakir, if voters are looking as closely as we are at the degree to which stuff is actually getting done in Parliament Hill. I think the bigger liability, for the Conservatives is their vote on this block motion. It's totally misaligned with everything that they've talked about in the past 2 years about advancing the interests of younger generations and being fiscally responsible. That may be something that they're held to account to more. I'm not sure them being an obstructionist, quote unquote, opposition party is really going to fall at their feet in the future.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But I mean, even them voting in support of it, they're not the government in power, right? If this were to move forward, if the Liberals were to implement this, they're the ones who are going to have to put the policy in place, put the $16 billion on the table, and have this kind of be implemented as an actual policy. I think at the end of the day, for the Liberals, this is a bigger concern for them because they're the ones losing support amongst youth, right? We talk about this notion of generational fairness. I think if you look at that 18 to 34 cohort, their numbers are pretty abysmal right now. And it might be actually wise for them to, look at seniors and say, can we get to a point where we have targeted assistance for, low-income seniors and move forward in that direction? Because why not cut your losses and focus your attention on a group that reliably shows up on election day, as opposed to looking at a voting bloc that you're clearly not winning and not doing very well with. And I'm uncertain that, even with the passage of time or even prorogation, that group's going to come back to you. So hopefully, for the Liberals' sake, they can find a way to negotiate with the bloc or even have the support of the NDP, but do something for a voting bloc that they can count on to be there on E-Day.
I feel like you're forecasting a bit of the future. I do think that they're going to come out with something that's more targeted. I don't know whether it will satisfy the bloc. I have to leave it on that out. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
We're just going to have to wait and see how this plays out. But this is why it's so important for the opposition party leaders to come together now and vote for non-confidence. And I think that you're going to see the bloc come out guns blazing on early Monday. And it's going to be an insane question period. So I highly recommend you guys go and subscribe to House of Canada, which is linked down below in the description. Because, I mean, if Trudeau pulls this off and just cancels out Parliament until all parliamentary proceedings, everything, they wouldn't even be going, there would be nothing for them to go into work to do, not to sign papers, not to do anything. They would just all basically go home. It would be just like Christmas break or summer break for politicians. They wouldn't get anything done. That would be insane. And I think that there would be an immense amount of backlash if that did happen. But again, Trudeau is out of options. And I think that, unless an election gets called or voted on confidence and they get that done before he has the ability to put forward that motion and basically just shut down Parliament to the fullest extent, I think that we're heading in a very, very negative direction. It's almost the first to initiate their motion is likely to get what they want, right? So I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments, but this is insane times, folks. This is insane. Like there's a lot of people that focus a lot of their attention on American politics, and I don't blame you, right? They do have an election within the next month, right? 29 days, 28 days away. But I mean, it's so important to also pay a tremendous amount of attention to what's happening here in Canada, because we're literally creating history ever. Like this has not happened where you have this much political tension, this high of popularity for the leader of an opposition, this low of popularity for a sitting prime minister, and just all of these shady deals that are kind of going on, and all of these like deep down kind of secret rules that they're pulling out of their hat to try and get something to happen. But nonetheless, that's where we're going to end the video. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments about just what's going to happen this week. What are your predictions? Let me know your reasoning. And again, if you haven't liked the video yet, I highly recommend that you do. Also subscribe to the channel, turn post notifications on so you can be notified of upcoming videos. And last mention of the stickers linked down below in the description or the pinned comment below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.